Hello, cat. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Keeping Up with Papa, Life After Work, where we find out how one man manages to keep himself busy, physically active, and mentally engaged after retirement with projects. Hey, we're shooting today from, well, out on our back porch. It's way too nice a day to be stuck inside, and also all my footage, well, it's already been shot, so we can sit out here and just have a nice, quiet chat. Today's project, well, it started out as one project, but it ended up being two. You see, my wife wanted some new shelves in her laundry room so she could store those, less often used kitchen items. And then, about the same time, my daughter-in-law wanted to have her storage area and her pantry room swapped. Quite a project. So, let's check it out. Welcome back. Well, by now you should be familiar with the theme of my video log, which is keeping myself engaged both mentally and physically after retirement with projects. Hey, I'm a firm believer in staying busy, and I love learning new skills and continuing to use those skills that I've learned, over the past 66 years or so. Hey, it keeps me sharp, or at least I like to think it does. And I like being constructive, and from time to time my family, well, they seem to make use of those little quirks of mine. And that's how one project for my wife morphed into a similar but quite a bit more complicated project for my daughter-in-law. Let's start with my wife's project. We have a long wall in my wife's laundry room, and over the years she's added this and that freestanding shelf for storage, and well, it's kind of ended up being sort of a hodgepodge or mix and match of, well, not quite matched shelving. So one day she realized that she'd be a whole lot better off if maybe that entire section of the wall had shelves across it. So, well, she asked me to build her some shelves. Well, I said I would, and I just didn't say when. But finally, after a few maybe, not so subtle reminders, my schedule suddenly came open, and we got together and we brainstormed on, what she might like to have. I've said this before, but it's amazing how each individual project is a little bit different, but they all have decisions that have to be made and a lot of research that has to be done. So many decisions need to be made when you're designing something as simple as shelves. The first, how deep should they be? 8 inches, 10 inches, 12 inches? Well, the answer ended up being as deep as possible and still allow my wife the ability to roll her hamper in and out of the laundry room. So, out came the tape measure, and we came up with a depth number. Then, general design. Would these be boxed in kind of like a bookcase with end walls on them, or would they be free hanging where you could see all the way through? If they're free hanging, would they be mounted on those white rails you buy at the hardware store where you just put them on the studs and clip in a shelf bracket? Or would they be something custom? Would the shelves be wood? Or would they be made out of wire? Would they be prefab? Or would they actually be a custom shelf wood material? So, guess which way that went? Oh yeah, custom. And no end wall, which quite frankly was a little bit easier for me. And these would be thick boards, not just cheap 3/4 inch particle board. The house is built in a log home style theme. You can see that behind me. So we end up using 2x10 unfinished pine as a starting point for the shelving. Now, what about shelf brackets? Geez, there's a lot of choices. You can get a style that uses kind of a triangular shape to it. You get the top and the back and then a brace in the middle. Well, that brace would be in the way. So instead we chose something a little different that was a little more free-floating. And we found that online and ordered those and had them shipped in. Now, how would you attach the brackets to the wall? Well, normally you would just find a stud and screw right into the studs, right? But well, as luck would have it, it's not going to really work well with the stud spacing that we have. It's, I don't know, it wouldn't really be very uniform, and it would leave the ends unsupported. Not a good idea. So something else had to be done. So we took a little bit different approach. We decided to go with a backing plate that was mounted to the studs. Then appropriately space the brackets on that backing plate for the uniform look that we wanted. This also gave us plenty of weight-bearing capability in all the right locations. So now, what about vertical shelf spacing? Well, we headed to Mr. Google, and we came up with some ideas. We realized that a variety of gaps would probably be best. We would have bigger gaps between the shelves at the bottom, so those larger, heavier items could be down there, and then smaller gaps from mid-range on up to the top. Now, in our case, in that room, we actually have a 9-foot ceiling, so I laid everything out on paper to get the maximum number of shelves inside the space allotted. Then I made a materials run. So before we could start actual construction, pretty much everything would need to be moved out of the way, and this would be scattered all around the house. So we did as much prep work in advance as we possibly could before preparing the workspace. I made all the necessary cuts on the boards to get the proper lengths. I sanded each board, I rounded the corners, and we stained them with our previously chosen stain color. Then I marked all the stud locations on the walls in advance. So now note here that there is an air conditioning duct in the wall near one end of the shelving. So I had to be careful not to screw into that by accident. It's a metal duct, I didn't want to damage it. Using a stud finder, well, that helped quite a bit. And everything was carefully marked before any drilling took place. Once all the studs were located and the materials were ready, I lined up my first backing plate, pre-drilled my first hole into the backing plate, and then I pre-drilled into the wall through that hole and set my first screw. Then, using a 4-foot level to ensure that the backing plate was perfectly level, I did exactly the same thing on the far end. I now had my first level backing plate. So, well, feeling a little cocky, I mounted the next 3 or 4 backing plates, and then I called my wife in for a quick look. Well, she quickly reminded me that we had come up with a totally different spacing pattern than the one that I was using. So, down came the top backing plates, leaving the bottom one because it was the only one that was accurate, and I started over. Fortunately, by then I had the process down pretty well, so I didn't lose a whole lot of time. Shelf brackets were next. Hey, this really was pretty darn easy. Now, I started on one end and I set the first one, and then I used my 4-foot level to locate the position for the next one, but I actually went 2 brackets over. Put that one in place, then repeated the process until I got to the very far end, and then I used the level to fill in the ones in the middle. Worked exceptionally well. I then repeated that process shelf by shelf by shelf. I used decorative screws to hold in the backing plates, and I used decorative screws to hold on the brackets themselves. Short black sheetrock screws came up from underneath to hold the shelves in place. You know what? The prep work took days. The actual assembly, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 hours, and that's it. And only that long because I had to correct an error that I made. In very short order, I was done. The result, a much nicer setup for those less often used items that still need to be easy to find. Well worth the effort, a very successful project. On to project number 2. Well, previously and during this process, my daughter-in-law had been dropping little subtle hints about how she might like to have her laundry room become a large walk-in pantry and her storage room in the garage become a laundry room. I'm finally convinced that this should probably be my next project. I agreed to help. But you know what? This was not just building shelves. This was actual remodeling. Fortunately, the 2 rooms were back to back, and the utilities for the existing washer and dryer shared a common wall with the storage room. That at least held some promise that maybe this would not be all that complicated. And, I would not be doing all of this by myself. My stepson and my grandson would be helping also. But I'd be doing all the planning and, well, the more technical work like moving the water and the sewer and electric from room A to room B. So that's where we started. After some careful measuring, we determined that we could actually just mirror image the washer, the dryer, and the laundry sink if we just knocked out the sheetrock in the storage room, just on the storage room side. Well, my stepson stepped in and took care of this, and this is what we came up with. Now, this really did make things pretty easy. The electrical was flipped first, then the copper water lines were cut and resoldered 180 degrees out from the original locations into the new room, and finally the drain was put in. Then a new service box for the laundry, well, that was installed. This meant, however, that the water lines, well, they'd be reversed. Normally the hot's on the left and the cold is on the right. But rather than reorient those actual lines, we just swapped out the hot and cold faucets in the service box. Kind of did the same thing on the laundry sink. By the way, since then I've completed another project where we added a laundry setup about 20 feet away from the water source. And instead of using hard copper, I used that new PEX PEX tubing and crimp-style shark bites. Let me tell you something. Had I known just how easy that was, I would have done exactly the same thing here. Once the plumbing and electrical were finished, up went new sheetrock. Now they decided to put up beadboard behind the washer and the dryer, so taping and mudding, that really wasn't necessary. Once the beadboard was up, I cut the copper lines out of cap to what would be the laundry sink and added quarter-turn compression valves. All that was left then was to cut a hole for the dryer exhaust and to hang the cabinets that had been moved from the other room and assemble the laundry sink. So my stepson took care of all that, and for me, I moved on to dressing out what would now be a large walk-in pantry. First step, we needed to hang a new custom-ordered pre-hung door. Now, that was not really a big challenge, but there was a lot of discussion about how to orient it, and it had custom glass with the word pantry on it, which is really very nice. You know what? It worked out perfect. Also, repairs had to be made to the sheetrock in the new pantry. Now, thinking ahead a bit, I added in some framing into the wall before hanging the new sheetrock on the backside, so there would be something to screw into from the pantry side and hold the little sheetrock plugs that needed to go in there. Well, my stepson took over those repairs, and he did all the mudding and the taping and the painting, and I sat back and waited. He had also left the original washer electrical outlet that was in the new pantry in place. Instead of flipping it around 180 degrees, I just extended that circuit and then added an outlet in the laundry room. Well, this gave them one extra plug in the pantry, and who knows, might be needed at some point in the future. Time to move on to shelves. Well, they decided on butcher block, so that meant buying a big 4-foot by 8-foot sheet of butcher block and ripping it down to shelf size. Not something I was looking forward to doing, but my stepson came up with an innovative jig for his circular saw that I'd never seen one before, and it worked really, really well. It gave us nice, clean, straight, accurate cuts. So the shelving was cut, and they set to sanding and staining the newly cut boards. In the meantime, they sent my grandson into the attic to move the AC duct over to the laundry room from the pantry, the new pantry. It wasn't really needed in the pantry, but it was definitely needed in the laundry room. Not a job that I would have wanted to do, but hey, it worked. Hanging the shelves was, well, a little more complicated than the ones in my wife's laundry room, as they would need to be on two walls in an L shape, and that meant they had to be perfectly aligned. In this case, we didn't really have to use a backing plate, as the stud spacing was really pretty much ideal. So using a similar process to the one we used at our place, we leveled and we spaced the new shelf hangers, and that was all based on a predetermined layout. This time I didn't screw up the spacing. And with the brackets up, well, the boards were not quite all sanded and stained, so I left the balance of the project with my stepson, and when I returned a few days later, they were up and they really looked good. Again, it turned out really well. Well, that's it. Another project, or maybe I should say 2 projects, completed, and 2 husbands with happy wives. I can say, or I guess maybe we both can say, we can check that one off our list. Well, thanks for watching, and please like, share, and subscribe. And as always, comments are welcome. See you next time on Keeping Up with Papa, Life After Work.
Woody, my helper, huh? You bring me my tools? Come on, bring me my tools. Let's go to work. That's it. Pick them up. Let's go. Come on, let's go. Where's my pliers?
My brackets on the backing plate.